Okay, that looks good, I think. Hello, and welcome to Procedural Objects 101. My name is Mighty, and today we're going to look at how to use PO, what it is, what you need, and everything else. Let's go. Number 1, the Steam Workshop. The first thing you obviously need when starting out with procedural objects is the mod procedural object. It was originally done by Simon Rear, who is still the only person really responsible for the mod. Linked to this are already the modules, which we're going to get into later, and some fonts, which we're also going to go into later. Aside from the mod procedural objects, you will also need find it to actually find the stuff we need. I highly recommend using loading screen mod if you're gonna have more than 2 or 3 mods. It's always recommended is to have the mod move it to help you navigate, move, copy objects, and so on. You can also download a whole list of fonts, icons, modules, and everything else that you might need for your work with procedural objects. 2 other mods that I highly recommend are the tree and vehicle prop mod, and you're also gonna need the hotfix to the tree and vehicle props patch for that. And the other thing I highly recommend is non-terrain conforming props, which you can see here. All of these need harmony to work. Number 2, why do I need PO? Well, that's a very good question. A lot of people want to customize and detail city skylines to a degree that's not possible with just assets. Or maybe you don't want to download a million different assets for every little thing, because who can handle that with their PC? I surely can't. Maybe your PC also cannot handle a million different assets. So instead of having an asset for everything, why not have select assets and you can change them to fit whatever you want and wherever you need. Also, maybe you want to make something bigger, smaller, a different color, a slightly different shape, or just a different shade, or you just want to write something on a sign. Here, PO is here to help you. With PO, you can create the most amazing custom assets in-game without having any knowledge of any 3D program like Blender. You can do so many different things with it, and we're gonna look at today the basic UI of the game, all the advanced options, how you PO a prop, how you handle PO shapes and textures, how to do your own textures and signs, how building blocks with PO really work, how to include POs into your city, and then we have some time to answer some questions. So let's get going with basic UI. Once I click on procedural objects, this is the basic UI that comes up. It will show that we are in selection mode right now, and you can see this rectangle with a plus inside, which means it'll show every procedural objects we have so far created as a rectangle with a plus on it. You see, for this garden here, I used quite some POs of different stuff, whether it be textures, whether it be plants, whether it be a fountain, or just some houses here. It'll show you the count of the objects you have, and it'll also show you a filter of stuff that you can group. So if you only want to show the props that I've used, just select props and you'll see all the props I have. If you want to see decals, then you can just select decals and you see the decals that I have pre-PO'd. If you want to see buildings, see all the buildings I have PO'd, and so on and so forth. Let's make everything visible again. The other options, you can have more statistics of what props you have. You can select the render options, which I highly recommend not to fiddle with. You can manage what modules you have. All the fonts you have installed are listed in this list. The textures you have are here. Here's my local textures folder, and here's the folder of the holograms that we're going to look at right in the end of this. You can also see all the objects you have already exported, which there are quite a few that I have done in other maps. If we talk about POing, what I mean is I have a prop, an asset, and the procedural objects button changes into a thing that says convert into PO. The keyboard shortcut for this by default is Shift and P. Now the UI shows you your different move tools, like just click to confirm it, right mouse button, hold and drag to rotate it, or just click for incremental rotations, page up and page down for your movement options, for your up and down movement options, holding Alt for slow, Shift for Shift and Alt for even slower motions. This is the basic UI for procedural objects once I have placed it down. The most important button will be the Edit button. The Move to will just give you the same options that we just had. Copy is a basic copy. We have a Delete and we have a More. And I'll look at More later on. We have a Color button, which we're also going to look at. The thing we're going to mostly talk about today is the Edit screen. The Edit screen will quickly change our UI. Now, on the PO itself, we only have 3 different buttons. One says Move to, one says Local Space, one says Position. And you have 3 colored axes on the object itself. This lower one can be changed to Scale and Rotation. While in position mode, you can click and drag the axis to change the position of the object. While in scale mode, you can click and drag to change the size of the object by that scale. Pressing page up will increase the size of the whole object. Pressing page down will decrease it. Here again, we can hold Alt for smaller movements, Shift for smoother movements, and Shift and Alt together for very small, smooth movements. While in rotation mode, you can click and drag the circles to rotate the object upon the axis that you have selected. This will always be a bit tricky. It'll use the programmed axis that the asset creators have set. For this object that I have here, it's fairly easy. One is a long axis, one is the short axis, and one is the height axis. If for some reason these axes are not the ones that you're familiar with, you can change local space to world space, where you would not be, where the axes are not the axis of the object, but of the surroundings. You see that between world space and local space, the rotational axes change. Also, the position axes change. For scale, this is not available. Let's look to the left to the basic UI. You have a window that basically explains all the movement keys and all the controls for PO. You have position and rotation in numeral values here. Sometimes it's very useful to work with the numeral values if you know by how many degrees you want to rotate an object. If you made any mistakes, just click on reset and it will reset the whole thing. Number 4, advanced options. Down at the bottom, we have 3 other edit tools. We have the text customization, we have the advanced edition tools, and we have customization. First, we're going to look at the advanced edition tools. With the advanced edition tools, you can do similar things to the things we did in the basic UI, but with a few more twists. For example, we can choose by what axis we want to mirror that model. We can also do size with a lot more finesse, with stretching by it on like similar axes. So for example, we can just like double that on the x-axis. Or if we're not happy with this, go back half and it's back to normal. Sometimes you have an object where the faces are going to be the wrong way for what you exactly want to do with it. So you can always flip the faces to show basically the insides of an object. Interesting is also the show option, where you can set in on day, night mode and always mode, which means you can have objects that only appear at night or only appear when it's daytime. Very interesting for some construction sites or some red light districts or evening entertainment districts, or also maybe for playgrounds that are only open for the day. The other very useful option you have in the advanced edition is the undo. You can undo a lot of steps in PO. The other thing we have down here is the customization, which is going to look like this, which is something we're going to look at later. We also have the text customization, which is something that I'm going to do right now. In the text customization window, you'll see the texture that the asset creator has used for the object. You can see it in this window where you have some zoom functionalities. Right of this, you have an add text field and add color rectangle. I'm going to start with the color rectangle mode. If I click on add color rectangle, it'll change to this. You have the color of the rectangle, the position of the rectangle, the width and the height and the opacity. First, we don't see anything at all because width and height are set to 0. We're just going to set them to some random value just to show you. Now I have a very big white rectangle on this, and you think, why would I ever need something like this? But it'll come in handy for quite some different options. Number 1, sometimes it's very difficult to colorize your object because sometimes the texture layer is too dark, too bright, or the color is too thick, and it's hard to give it a different color. So let's say I didn't want the foot of the planter to be this color. I'm just gonna drag this over here, make it white. Now you think this is too white, but I can just change the opacity on this and the bricks will still shine through. Now what'll happen if I go back is now if I change this color, it will affect the color rectangle as well. And sometimes this will not work on every object. If it's still not what you exactly want, then of course you can still go back and just change the color of your rectangle. And now you have a red brick planter without having everything being red, right? So let's give this a nice dark red color, which might be something like this. You always have to go a lot darker than you would expect. Now, of course, you can still delete this. You can copy it, and more importantly, lock the position. I'm gonna make this smaller just to show you something. If I add another color rectangle, let's give this a green color, make this like medium sized, and let's say I'll move this here. So I'm just clicking it, not dragging it, because once you click it, it's like magnetic on your mouse and you can drag it around. Click again and you place it down. Now I have two of them. And of course you never want to have this weird color combination on your planter, but this is just for showing you. Now if you click, sometimes you move the wrong one, and it's sometimes very hard to get them to be exactly right again. This is why you can lock them. So even if I click here, it will not move this one. Yeah? So if I lock both of them, they're set in their position. Now, you might still think these color rectangles are not very useful, are they? But let me give you a smaller demonstration of what you might use them for. So if I create a color rectangle that's maybe still dark red, for this planter, you can do something as easy as this, where I have now recolored an individual brick on this texture. And now maybe you can use your own imagination for all the things where this might be useful. What I have done in the past is I've changed colors for clothing of civilian props. I have changed the suits of cars. I have changed statues around and given them different colored parts. Houses where the roof has 2 different colors or even 3 different colors. Your creativity has a lot of space to use for the color rectangle option. The second thing we want to talk about is the add text field. Now add text field looks similar. It gives you a color option. It gives you a free text insert, position, size, spacing, and scale. Now let's write something. Since this is white and we have the basic Arial font selected, we just have the word hello in white in Arial now on this red brick. It works the same thing, but now you see why it's important to lock one so you can have the other still moving. With size, I can just increase the size of the overall texture. With spacing, I can increase the spacing of the word. Scale will give me an option to stretch it either by the X or by the Y axis. And here you have the fonts that we talked about in the beginning. You can use all sorts of fonts from the workshop and maybe have some great graffiti fonts to make your own graffiti on objects. Maybe you even find the perfect font for your street signs on this. Talking about street signs, so you can see if we have find it, let's look for a sign, shall we? And you think, oh no, I forgot to have a blank sign. Well, with procedural object, it doesn't even matter. Let's use this highway sign from the Swedish sign collection. Shift P will convert it into a PO. I'll click to place it on the plus sign, click Edit, and click on Text Customization. Now, here we have it pretty easy to see where our texture is. Here is the picture. All I do is I create a color rectangle. Let's make this blue. It's going to be a little bit wider than high. You can either use this window to confirm, or you can just look on the real object to see if you got everything. Now it's all covered. And make this slightly more blue. Now let's add some text. There's a lot of fonts out there that are specifically tailored towards sign creation. We have this Ghost Road Sign Arrows font. With this Ghost Road Sign Arrows, we can just see which arrow we need for our sign. You can just increase the size in here and then click and drag it to wherever we want. Closing this down, going back, we now see that we have a perfectly made up arrow sign that you can just use wherever you want. Of course, now when you copy it and paste it down, you just have the same one over and over and over again. Number 5, POing a prop. To know which prop is going to be able to be changed by the procedural object, we can use Find It again. You click on this extra filter panel plus sign. There's a tag that says non-terrain conforming. We click this, click on the little box, and it'll show you all the props that are non-terrain conforming. This is why I recommend the non-terrain conforming prop mod, which will make a copy of every prop and have it as a non-terrain conforming option. Most, if not all, terrain conforming props cannot be used with PO. PO only wants props that are non-terrain conforming. We can use this planter again to show you what I mean. Shift and P will again convert it into a prop. Clicking with my left mouse button will place it on the ground. The first tip I always give is whenever you work on changing a prop, increase its size. And by increasing, I mean increase it by a lot. The reason for increasing the size is that simply we can see much better what we're doing. I've already talked about the position, the scale, and the rotation options. But one thing I have not talked about is the customization options. Every object has sides, corners, and vertices. The vertices of the objects are shown with these blue dots. You can, on one hand, see the real size of your object is where the blue dots end. But you can also see what other triangles the creator has used. For example, you can clearly see how these are different vertices. Easy to understand if you know how to create props. If you don't know how to create props, It's not a problem. Just play around with a lot of non-terrain conforming props and you'll soon see what I mean. I used to just play around with so many props until I figured out what can I manipulate in what way. I'm going to show you some simple and easy things to do. If I use my right mouse button, I can draw a selection marquee. Let's do this and select these 4 vertices. You see that it's only the upper edge and only these 2 corners. Now, again, the mouse has the same 3 options that we had before: position, rotation, and scale. Let's stay with position for a while. Not only can I now move these vertices with my mouse by clicking and dragging them, I can also move them or change them with my keyboard. The controls for these are up here in the window. For example, left and right, up and down will usually be relative to your camera position, relative to the position of the object, and relative to world and local space. So sometimes it takes a while to figure out which button moves what vertices in which direction. Now I've rotated the prop to a way where down is down, up is up, left is left, and right is right. Page up will move it on the vertical axis, and page down will move it down again. Now with the scale option selected, if I click and drag my mouse, it will increase the scale of the selected vertices. If I only have 2 selected, you will see the difference. Now I'm only changing this. I can also have all selected, and we're basically back to our scaling option. So if you wanted to have a thicker edge of this planter, you could just increase the scale on all of these 4 corners here. Just clicking and dragging them will do exactly that. Rotation is another interesting tool. Let's select a flat surface. The mouse rotation option, I will click, and now you see that this is basically exactly what you probably have imagined happens. Now rotates these vertices along an axis. Now let's look at what the UI gives us. If I select these vertices, for example, you see we have recenter object origin, which sometimes is very important to use. We have merge vertices, which will just simply connect all the vertices in the central spot. Let me show you. All of these vertices are now connected in a single spot. I can go to Advanced Addition Tools, where I showed you before. Here is our undo function. The next will be align, which will align all these vertices on a line. Next, we have flatten selection. You can guess what this does. Exactly. All the vertices are now on the same height. Let's use these ones on the ground to show you something else. We have snap selection to the ground, which means the ones that I have selected will all be together snapped to the ground as the game recognizes. You see that this does not always make it perfectly flat, because the selection, it goes from the center of the selection. So I can also do snap each to ground, which will move every individual one to the ground. If your ground is not flat, you can try and work with the selection conforming tools right here. I want to show you something that I do a lot, is the merge vertices tool. For example, I can select this side, merge these vertices, and now I have this weird shape. So before we saw how to easily make this planter into a pyramid by merging these vertices, which will give us this neat little pyramid. So if all you wanted was a perfectly nice pyramid, here you are. Just be aware that this is not one vertex. All the other vertices still exist in this single point though. There's so far no way to remove vertices. You can only merge them together in a single spot. But with this merge function, I have done a lot of different things in the past. Number 6, PO shapes and textures. Now this is a very interesting subject because now we're going away from pre-made assets into putting your own ideas into the game. Together with the procedural object mod, you get this cube and this square. With the mod too many shapes, you get a lot of different shapes. And now new on the workshop are these holographic shapes in different forms. We are going to start with a simple procedural object square. Now, while you have this selected, convert this into PO by clicking the button or Shift P. This is a new screen that we have not seen before. This only appears for objects which do not have a pre-defined texture applied. Let me show you where the texture files on your computer are. If you go in your Windows Explorer, you can just add percentage app data percentage, which will take you to your personal app data roaming file. What we need is the local folder. What we need is the local folder, and in the local folder, you search for the Colossal Order folder. Inside, you have City Skylines, and inside there, you have Procedural Objects. Here, we have the texture folder. This is what we need. In this folder, what we want are PNG files. If you have JPEG files like this one, it's simple as renaming this into a PNG file. You don't even have to convert it in any external software. Just change the JPEG extension to a PNG extension. Procedural object will still recognize this. Now, some people will tell you that you need exactly square textures or an exact resolution. And that is not true. I will show you in a second why that's not true. Now, to fill this folder, you can do a few couple things. You can go to textures like holyhaven.com, textures.com, or just your plain and simple picture search. If you download textures from a texture site like polyhaven.com, what you want to be looking for is the diffuse picture. Even though this says normal, don't go for normal. You don't want the normal map. A normal map looks like this. So always go for the diffuse option. You can just download the PNG right away. Save this in the procedural object texture folder, and you're done. Notice how I did not close down cities. It's still running in the background. Use our square, convert this into PO, click on the arrow for local textures. What I want to do first is I want to hit the refresh button. The refresh button will just make sure that City Skylines loads all the pictures in that folder. Since I added a new one, it will take just a few seconds to load the new textures into that into the local folder. We're just gonna find the texture we have just downloaded from the internet. This is the wood table texture we just found on the website. Click on it and you see it's automatically applied to this square. The resolution is just as high as you got it, so the higher the resolution, the better it's gonna look. Now, obviously the position thing still works the same. The rotation also just works fine. The scale, however, is a different subject. Since do you see what happens if I change the scale? Yes, that's right, tiling. Now, here is where you want to click on Advanced Edition Tools again. Once you apply a custom texture to your procedural object, you can set the texture UV mode between repeat and stretch. I usually set it to stretch, so what I can do is I can decrease the size while the texture stays the same. This is extremely useful if you have pictures or text on the square and you want to use it as a sign. You don't want it to cut off. You want the size to be exactly right. Let's do this again just one more time so you can see how it works. Local textures, open this. Let's use this so you can see what I mean with the stretching. Place this down, go for Edit, Advanced Edition Tools, Texture UV Mode, Stretch, and now change this to scale. And when I pull this down now, it'll stretch it to the perfect size so you can read the text and the graphic just looks perfect. Now you have your own custom-made exit sign for your emergency exits. Number 8, building blocks. What I mean with building blocks is we're not going to use the square, we're going to use the PO cube. If we PO this, I can also apply any texture I want. We're just going to use something that works. Let's use this brick wall texture. You see that PO now applies the texture to all sides of this cube. We have this beautiful high resolution brick texture. I can do the same thing. I can do the same thing by clicking texture UV mode and setting it to stretch. So what I do have now is I have my custom made wall asset. If I go into position now, hold my control key and click and drag, let's say the red arrow, it'll duplicate this. Now I can put these next to each other, and since I have this nice texture, it'll just tile. So now you know what I mean with building blocks. I can actually use PO cubes with custom texture to build my own assets in game. Of course, if the cube is not the right shape, then you still have the ball, you have the cylinder or the empty cylinder, you have different prisms and wedge shapes with like rounded edges or beveled edges, and we have this pentagonal prism shape. Also a flat circle and a flat pentagon. Here is an example of what you can do with the building blocks technique that I just showed you. This house that I'm showing you a screenshot of here, gonna look like this, is done completely with only PO cubes. No circles, no rounded shapes, no nothing. Even if you look closely, you see that even the windows are made out of different PO cubes, different ones for the actual panel, the frame, or the windowsill. Same goes for the roof, chimney, and the balconies. This is just one example of the great and amazing custom things you could build by just using this building block technique that I just showed you. Number 8, including POs into your city build. I do a lot of detailing, so sometimes things just don't look exactly like I want them to. It might be a nice asset, but maybe it's lacking something. And this is where the true power of PO combined with custom assets comes in. This house, for example, was perfectly fine by its own, but what I really wanted was a second entrance in the front. All I did was downloaded this metal texture, made this awning, put a texture of a door here and some stairs. Now we have a second entrance to this house. Another thing that I did is found this little garage, but it was too white, but it was too uniformly painted for my taste. So here you can see the color rectangles in full swing. You see how many color rectangles I use, which is slightly different shades of red, to just give it this slightly stripy look that I exactly wanted for this Swedish build that I'm doing. Or maybe for your backyard, you want to build a deck and you don't have an asset for that, but everything else is fine. So I'm just using PO blocks here with this wooden texture to build a deck with some pillars and some lamps that I made smaller with POs. Sometimes POs are very useful when you're working on uneven terrain. Here, for example, I built this little driveway next to the house and the carport here. I PO'd some curbs because the terrain was all sloped. And with PO, it's very easy to just get the right angle of slope for an object. So when including POs into your existing city build, you can just look for practicality or for beauty or whatever you need. If you are gonna PO buildings, you might want to look into block services, which will give you all the functions that you need if you want your city to work. Like, for example, level 5 residential build, and you can put the block service into your PO building. It'll still work, like the game will still recognize it as a level 5 residential building. You can have block services for pretty much every house, every service, or every institution that you can find in the game and in every DLC so far. Just check them out on the Steam Workshop. Thank you for watching this video. I will try to upload more City Skylines tutorials or even other videos I'm doing on my stream. Check out my stream on twitch.tv/mighty0. Find out more. Go follow me over there, will you? Thank you so much. See you next time.